Hello everyone, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee, and we want to welcome you all to yet another episode. Today we are going to be discussing a fruit that unites the world, the banana. Today there are thousands of varieties of bananas, and although we surely don't all eat the same one, we do recognize a banana when we see one. But despite all the thousands of varieties, it should be interesting to note that the banana ranks right up there along with maize or corn, as well as wheat and rice, as the world's fourth most staple crop. However, the variety that us Westerners are used to today is the Cavendish. This is the sweet dessert banana that we see piled up on supermarket shelves, hanging in convenience stores, or of course they're ever present in cafeterias. And we know that these bananas can be used to make a variety of wonderful and unique dishes such as parfaits, my mom's banana nut bread, or a family favorite, my Nana Bee's Nanner Pudding. So with the seemingly glowing reviews that I have already placed upon this humble yet delicious fruit, it should be interesting to note that there was a time when people viewed the banana as a harbinger of doom, and very few wanted anything to do with it. But before we dive into the why, we have to go into the how. How the banana came to be the commonplace fruit that it is today. Well, like many things, such as tobacco, tomatoes, potatoes, however, we don't really know the exact origins 100%, but we do have scientists who have guesstimated, if you will, that the banana was probably being grown as far back as 10,000 years ago. In fact, some state that it is the world's oldest fruit. The country of origin is not known, but it was deemed to have been growing around the same time in the different regions of the Malaya Peninsula, Indonesia, the Philippines, and of course New Guinea. And from there, it did not take very long for tradesmen and merchants to take it across the world. And in fact, by 327 BC, when Alexander the Great and his army invaded India, he was delighted to discover the banana in the India Valley. And with his discovery, he sent it back to Greece where it could be cultivated there. Whether or not it took, we don't really know. There's not much record about it, but yet what we do know is that the banana that Alexander the Great ate then was certainly not the bananas that we eat now. Because at that time, bananas had not yet been genetically modified or cultivated to the state that we know and love today. Because at the time, they had very large seeds and not much tasty pulp. Yet, even with this ancient banana, if you will, we see that by the 16th century, the banana was introduced to the Americas by Portuguese sailors and tradesmen, and when they realized they hit the jackpot of cultivating territory down in the Caribbean and the Bahamas, they very quickly set up plantations there to grow the bananas and cater to an increasing European appetite for this yellow fruit. But that led to some interesting discussions, because as the banana was becoming more commonplace in society, certain herbalists and botanists would sit down and have discussions about the newest fruit, the newest vegetable, whatever kind of plant was new on the scene. They were going to sit down and have a discussion about it. And one of the discussions that I thought I'd share with you from my research was that certain herbalists and botanists thought that the banana tree was actually the tree described in the Bible as being the tree of the knowledge between good and evil. Yeah, well, the reason being is because this comes from a purely practical perspective as they saw it. They deemed that when Adam and Eve partook of the fruit and realized they were naked, well, the banana leaves would serve far better to cover up their shame as opposed to apple or fig leaves. But I digress. However, what we do know is that although the bananas were still not commonplace yet, and we're going to backtrack just a little bit, is that in 1597 they were being studied. And in 1597, it was, as a matter of fact, when John Gerard actually released his book, The Herbal and General History of Plants, in which he has a passage about the banana and says that the fruit hereof yieldeth but little nourishment. It is, however, good for the heat of the breast, the lungs, and the bladder, yet hurteth the stomach if too much of it is eaten. Now, although we know today that, well, yeah, your stomach's going to hurt if you eat too much of anything, we do have to be patient with Mr. Gerard's assessment of the banana, because we got to remember this is before people could transport fruits and vegetables and meats at a fairly quick rate of speed, and there was no refrigeration either. So the fruit or the banana that he was consuming at this time would have been pickled as opposed to fresh. Now that stands to reason why he had gastrointestinal issues after consuming the banana. So his assessment is not really a fair one. But in later years, in 1633, we see that Mr. Thomas Johnson, another herbalist, botanist, and merchant, was able to expand upon Mr. Gerard's entry of the banana, and he gives it a rather glowing review. States that the banana is mighty tasty, and that it has the size of the largeness of a bean, or a great bean, as he puts it. So don't imagine a kidney bean or a pinto bean. Imagine kind of like them beans you used to sit there and snap on the porch with your grandparents all day, and you kind of got the idea of what he was talking about at that time. Now, the interesting thing is that when he was studying the banana, before he put down his entry into the herbal and general history of plants, was bananas that he had hanging in his shop. And he describes them as in a green, not ripe state, which raises an eyebrow because more than likely by that time the bananas that he had in his shop would have been shipped from Bermuda. And this is, mind you, again, pre-refrigeration. So how in the world was he able to get those bananas in such a well-preserved state to where they wouldn't bother his stomach like they did with Mr. Gerard's? Well, unfortunately, that raises questions which, in my research, I've not been able to find an answer to. If any of you out there have an answer to that, please feel free to let me know. I'd be greatly appreciative of it, and I would like the chance to learn more. But nonetheless, this does also raise an important point, and that is spoilage. Spoilage and speed. Those were the two things that went hand in hand with the transportation of many things at that time, and the banana was no exception. And it was because of this that the banana, as well as several other reasons, was believed to have been bad luck. So let's dive into those reasons. The first reason is that at the time, ships and seafaring vessels, whether it be merchant or fishing vessels, they were prone to sometimes get lost at sea and be smashed by the waves or shipwrecked, what have you. And in some cases, if a ship came up after and discovered the wreckage of what had once been your ship, because you're by now probably sleeping with the fishes, well, however, the bananas were still floating atop the water. And this led to some of the superstitious sailors believing that the banana was the cause of the misfortune. Another reason, and this is one that still stands the test of time today, as to why people didn't like the idea of handling these bunches of fruit, was that inside there are our eight-legged arachnid friends, the spiders, who can be ever present, and they can be poisonous, if not downright venomous, and their bites can lead to illness, severe wounds, or outright death. And so sailors naturally wanted to avoid that because I don't think any one of us would like to experience anything like that. But another reason, which is one that we touched on, was spoilage. Spoilage and speed, speed and spoilage. The banana, as we all know today, as soon as you buy it from the supermarket, if you don't go ahead and eat it, unless you have intentions to make banana bread afterwards, it spoils like that. And so the sailors were faced with the monumental task of actually getting the bananas and transporting them back to the country in which they were to be sold without them going bad. Otherwise, the expedition was a total loss. And so the ships had to go all rigging out. In other words, they were traveling as fast as they possibly could, and this led to some of the sailors on board believing that because the ship was going so fast, they couldn't properly throw a line overboard and try and catch some fish with which to supplement their daily monotonous larder. And of course, this certainly would have been the same case aboard fishing vessels, because if any of you have ever been out in a channel or on the ocean or even a lake, then you know that if a boat is going by you too quickly, it can lead to some pretty serious wake. Trust me, I know. And, well, that would disturb the fishing, if not downright threaten to capsize your boat, depending upon the size of it. So Again, it was an omen of bad luck. But interestingly enough, there is a modern interpretation to the whole reason as to why people were not able to catch fish when bananas were being transported upon these wooden seafaring vessels, and that is, this sounds redundant, but say it with me, spoilage. Because we all know that the banana not only ripens very quickly, but it also spoils very quickly. And as it does so, in both stages, it releases what is called ethylene gas. And some scientists state that ethylene gas in some way can be so strong that it could not only rot other produce on board, but it could actually permeate through the hull and the bulwark of the ship and into the water, and it would affect the fish in a way that they would try to avoid those boats. But I digress. I've never had to transport bananas, except in my car from the supermarket to the house, and I hope I will never be forced to resort to transport bananas in any other way. I like staying on land. So with all those different theories, it's interesting to see how the banana, a fruit that we all know and love today, was considered such a harbinger of doom and yet a luxury at the same time. Now, don't get me wrong, it certainly wasn't no pineapple. And those, in fact, were so exciting and luxurious that they could be rented for the day in order for you to present it to your guest in your hall, your parlor, or upon the dinner table to flaunt your lavish wealth. Sounds a bit excessive, you say? Well, you were more than welcome to buy one if you wanted to, as long as you had a spare $8,000 in today's money lying around. Yeah. So, with that being said, we will discuss the history of the pineapple and the industry surrounding it in an upcoming episode. But folks, I think this brings today's episode to an end. I think we got a lot covered, and I thoroughly hope you've enjoyed it. I want to thank you so much for following along on Facebook and YouTube. Your support is greatly noted. As always, if you like what we do, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. This is the way you help the channel grow. Also, be sure to click the bell icon so you'll never miss an episode. And with that being said, we hope you'll join us for next week's episode. But until then, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum, signing off for now, saying goodbye and God bless.